Sit still. We have temporarily taken over your motion picture screens to bring you the following message. You're doomed!
Oh, there's the phone now. I wonder who that is. Oh. Hello?
Hello?
Bill?
Bill.
Hi, it's Craig. Crawford.
Hey, Craig, how are you?
Yeah, and I got my partner David Blank on here. We call him Celebrity Guru Dave B on this to
Hey,
give him
Celebrity
the hip-hop
Guru.
sound. Hi. Bill Hudson, we tracked you down to talk about your startling book about your marriage to Goldie Hawn, but I know you recognize that last song clip from your days with the Hudson Brothers, your real brothers, when you topped the charts when I was in high school, as a matter of fact. And then, but first, that clip from the movie Hysterical, which is a cult horror classic, and you guys must have had a blast doing that movie.
Well, we did. We had a lot of fun doing it, but it became this cult thing. These college kids started watching it, smoking their bongs and all that stuff, and they started getting into it. And I can't believe you opened with "You're Doomed," because I have been in a store or something, and some kid will come up to me and go, "You're doomed," and at first I didn't get it, and I thought, well, possibly, but then it hit me. It's from that movie.
What a perfect environment. Quiet, peaceful. Oh no! They're even reading my book here! That's okay. I've made the right decision. I feel creative already. Everything is gonna be just fine.
Watch when you're driving, slick.
I'm sorry.
You talking to me? You talking to me?
I'm looking for Kate. Kate from the real estate office. Look, I'm looking for 1313 Cliffview.
Woo! Woo! He wants to know where the old lighthouse is!
Great. I asked the village idiot.
Hi, I'm Ralph. They think I'm touched, but I know something they don't know. You're doomed. Doomed. Definitely. Doomed.
You're still doomed! Oh, no!
Terrific. A town with two village idiots.
Dave?
Well, I remember your show. I posted about your book on my Facebook page, and it brought back the Hudson Brothers they had the biggest crush on. And that made me wonder, did you ever have instances where you and your brothers were interested in the same woman?
Oh, all the time. but we never, it was funny because we called it Competition Orange. Why orange, I don't know. And we would compete, but whoever started really making headway, everybody backed off. There was never fought or argued over it, but we definitely had fun with it. No
How did you guys get started? I mean, were you literally a garage band, or how did it get going?
Yeah, we're from Portland, Oregon, and when I was 6 years old, I saw Elvis Presley. My father took me to see Elvis, and in person, and that was it. I was done. And by the time I was 12 actually, I had all these bands, but I had these two brothers, and I thought, well, why not? So Mark learned to play drums, and Brett learned to play bass, and we spent years in the garage, and then started playing in about 1965.
Wow!
And played every high school dance and everything you could possibly imagine, and then years later, we were at this party in Hollywood because I had a Volkswagen Bug, and we'd drive it down from Portland, Oregon, try to sell our music and stuff and get signed to a record label, and nothing was happening. And we had this friend who was throwing this party, and we had no place to stay. And he said, "Look, if you paint my dining room before this party, you can come to the party and stay at my house." It was a good deal. We painted the dining room, went to this party, and it was this giant Hollywood party. Led Zeppelin was there, and Elton John, and Bernie Taupin, and this guy named Chris Beard, who was producing the Sonny and Cher show at the time.
Oh.
And he just hooked up with us, and we were making him laugh. We had no idea who he was. And about 3 weeks later, we got a phone call saying, "Why don't you come down to CBS and do this test for this show?" So we did.
It's just like in the movies.
Just like in the movies, yeah. But there was 10 or 12 years before that wasn't like in the movies.
Right.
So, and that's what happened. And then we were doing a show, and then Bernie Taupin was producing us, and everything just started happening.
And that was probably the years when Elton John was a lot of fun, right?
It really was, man. We knew Elton and Bernie before their first record hit. We were all hanging out in L.A.
Wow.
And Bernie actually came up to Portland and stayed at my mom's house for 4 months. We made this little 8mm movie called Road to Gold River. And we were just hanging out. They had already recorded their album. It hadn't come out, and then it just exploded. So we were there from the beginning, and Bernie actually produced 2 albums with us, and we were really close friends.
Well, Bernie's always been like the silent partner there. He just hasn't sought the limelight. I don't know very much about him.
Yeah, he's a real interesting guy. He's really quiet, great lyricist, great poet, and just a real interesting guy because he writes all the time, jots down little words, but then basically right before they're about to do an album, he'll take about 2 weeks, write all the lyrics, give them to Elton. Elton will write all of the music in a week, and then they record it. It's remarkable. It's really great. But he's a real interesting guy. He's into horses and bulls, and he's he's a painter, and he's just a really cool guy.
Who wrote your music?
My brothers and I.
You wrote it together?
Yeah, my brother Mark and Brett and I wrote everything. We wrote a few songs with Bernie Taupin too, which is interesting. There's a song, I don't even remember what album it's on. It's called Lonely School Year. And then there's one called Spinning the Wheel on this album called Ba Fa, which is great. We wrote that with Bernie as well. And so I've written with Bernie, and we had this record out called Rendezvous, which was quite a good hit for us. And we wrote that with Bruce Johnston from the Beach Boys in a restaurant, just blind drunk.
I mean, these days, the record business is so different now. I just wonder if kids like you can break out in the same way.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you what's interesting, Craig, is that it is different. And the great thing about when there were record companies, even though it was difficult to get signed, is that there was at least a body that was sort of filtering what was great to what was just okay or good. I mean, there were professionals, and as difficult as they were in the early days, the people that were running the record companies were very much into music. But it became very corporate, and now at one point, back in the 60s and early 70s, you would have a top 50 radio station that would play. 1 minute they'd be playing The Who, and the next minute they'd be playing, Dionne Warwick or, Herman's Hermit. It was a real eclectic mix of music that everybody was getting fed. And now what they've learned to do is they recognize the fact that for commercial reasons or for commerce, they basically have really segmented everything, adult contemporary, adult country, pop, soft rock, soft pop, everything. There's like 9,000 charts because it's easier for them to sell and it's less money for them to create that stuff. But now there are no record companies to speak of, really. I mean, they exist, but it's not the same thing at all. Kids are doing their own music on the internet, and if they get enough,
they get it on YouTube and get discovered.
Yeah, well, they get discovered, and if they break out on the internet, they've got these record companies that are looking for that, and then they go after them.
Well, now we want to get into the book. 2 versions, The Other Side of Fame and Family, all about your years with Goldie Hawn, and the tabloids have been all over it. And Dave B. has read every word and has plenty of questions about it. So let's dive right into that, Dave.
All right, go ahead, Dave.
I read it over the Christmas holidays and really enjoyed it. My favorite part of the book really gave me a taste for what you were going through. There was a part where you and Goldie had split, but you still had contact, and you met Goldie on a street, and she was kind of in a bad mood, and she grabbed your arm.
Right.
And do you remember this? And you, somebody walked by right at that moment, and recognized Goldie and saw that there was physical contact between you and told you, stop hurting Goldie.
Exactly.
But she was the one who was the victim.
Well, that epitomized everything. What happened was that we were in a mediation with a judge over custody. And after the mediation, we left the office together, and we were on the sidewalk and where the cars were parked. And I said, look, let's just stick with the visitation agreement. Let's not argue over this. And she grabbed my forearm and said, I'm going to do what I want to do. And she was actually being kind of aggressive. And it was actually a homeless guy that was sitting on the street drinking Jack Daniels who got up and said, don't you touch her, and came running for me. And I was like, oh, my God. So it epitomized everything. It was sort of it was like everything that was happening. I was always on the defensive, and and it got tiring after a while, whether it was some guy in the street or the publications.
How did you and Goldie first meet?
Coming back from New York on a plane.
Well, I read about that, but you were both in first class, but your band was in economy, and you were back there having fun with them and didn't pay much attention to her until the very end.
We would always fly first class. My brothers and I and the managers would always be in first class, and the band would be in coach. Simply an economical thing, but it was more fun in coach. So after takeoff, I would get free drinks for everybody and bring them back, and I would hang out in coach, and I was there for the entire flight, and had no interest at all, and then just struck up a conversation, and that was the beginning of, I don't know what to call it right now, but ultimately ended in disaster.
And your first date was sort of prescient, I suppose, because you were having dinner with her, and she was talking to this other guy, and then you found out it was her husband.
Yeah, well, we were having dinner, and there were these two other people there, and the woman was very nice. Her name was Gina, and this guy Gus was just ignoring me, just like, and actually just blatantly rude. And I'm thinking, God, what did you do? See my show? And I had no idea. And so when they left, I said, well, Gina was great, but this Gus guy, what a jerk, man, how rude. And then she said, well, that was my husband. It's like, oh, my God. No wonder. Everything about that, when I look back at it, you know how there are signs in life, and hindsight is always 20/20?
Right.
There were signs everywhere. But I was, young, and I had just gotten into Hollywood from Portland, Oregon, and it was quite impressive, and it was exciting, and we were becoming famous, and everybody knew who we were, and it was a real interesting time. But for a young guy, I was only 24, just turned, I was making every wrong move I could possibly make.
Well, now, as things got more serious and you realized you're going to be getting married, I know Goldie was half Jewish. Was religion at all an issue? Did you have to convert or anything?
No, it wasn't. But that's an interesting. I'm glad you asked that, because I was surprised, because when we first met, she said she was Catholic, and so I thought that.
Oh, really?
And I was brought up Catholic, and then I was with her mother and her father, and we were doing something, and all of a sudden her father said that they were Episcopalian. I said, I thought you were Catholic. She said, well, it's close. And then with the whole wedding thing, all of a sudden I'm thinking, well, however it's going to be done, there was all of a sudden a priest and a rabbi doing the ceremony. Another sign that happened. You know how in the Jewish tradition you break the glass and do the mazel tov thing?
Yeah.
It took me 3 times to break it. It squirted out from the cloth that they had.
I guess some of them
there
are
was
pretty
dead
sturdy,
silence
so, yeah.
from the whole congregation after the second time I missed it. And then the priest leans over to get something, and his sleeve caught on fire, and my brother Brett, without missing a beat, just clapped the flame off of his. I mean, the whole thing was like, it was like, oh my God. And then the next day, my brothers and I left to do The Wizard of Oz in St. Louis at the Muni Opera.
Oh. Well, now, the first day or night you were married, you found out she wanted an open marriage?
Yeah, well, it wasn't then. It was before that. But I
before.
thought, but now remember, I'm fresh off the boat from Portland, Oregon, which is, and I grew up, with a very devout Catholic mother, and believe it or not, there was the values up in those days were really interesting. You tried to be good, and you tried to adhere to certain, values and stuff that you were brought up with. And so when I was asked if I believed in open marriage, I said yes. But I thought what was meant by that was being open with each other in a marriage. And I found out about a year and a half later that was not
what you're thinking.
What it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about green behind the ears, huh?
Well, then the kids came along, and I'm interested in what the lifestyle was like. Was it a Hollywood lifestyle, or was it a normal family? Like, for instance, when the kids became teenagers, did they drive a Porsche to school, or how did that work?
No, it was pretty normal. I mean, Oliver's first car was a Volkswagen.
Mm-hmm.
And that part was relatively normal. They did grow up in a real Hollywood lifestyle, and it was a thing that I really wasn't really fond of, because it wasn't coming from my end. By that time we were divorced, but there were private planes and just things like that, and there was this expectancy that they that it was theirs, and it sort of it really definitely alters the way a kid thinks. I think kids should be brought up rolling in the mud, earning an allowance, and driving their first car should be a beat-up Volkswagen, not a brand new one.
Uh-huh.
And let's be clear, your children with Goldie are Kate Hudson, who has made several movies, and Oliver Hudson, who's a TV star.
Right.
But you have not had contact with them for how long?
Well, it's been about, 4 years with Kate and 3 with Oliver.
Huh.
Mm.
And
but there was an interesting time, because there was a place where everything was together. In the process of the public arguments that were going on and the things that were said about me that were not accurate, and I was always on the defensive, and it got so bad at one point that I said to the kids, Kate was about 12 and Oliver was 15, and I said, look, I hate that this stuff, every time your mother's doing a movie or something, she goes to the press, and this Vanity Fair article had just happened and I responded to it, which really didn't make
Oh,
anybody
yeah, I actually had looked that up, where Kate Hudson said Bill was meaning you, of course, Bill was sort of in and out of our lives. I don't hate him for it. I guess what I feel is frustration and curiosity, like what was it about me he didn't want to know?
Yeah. No, I've read that before too, but the truth is that I was in their lives constantly until 1993, which is when everything sort of blew up with this custody battle. We had the mediation with the judge. That was the thing I told you about, with the guy that grabbed, was coming after me with his Jack Daniels bottle. But what it was, and it became very public. And what happened is that the judge said, "Listen, you've got to, follow these visitation orders," and of course she didn't, and it just became worse and worse and worse, and I was always on the defensive. And so what happened is that when Kate was about 12 and Oliver was 15, I sat them down. I said, "Look, I hate this. I hate that it's public. The kids were old enough where their friends would read it, their parents' friends would read it. Even when they were young, it bothered me. So I never was the aggressor on that. I was always defending myself." And I said to them, so here's what I'm going to do. I can't fight over this visitation anymore, because half the time you're in Aspen. If I plan a trip to Hawaii or to Portland to see your grandmother, your mother changes plans literally sometimes the day before we were going to leave on vacation. And just would take the kids on this private jet to, London or New York. And I said, so here's what I'm going to do. Maybe this will make it easy for everyone. If you want to be with me for a day, for a weekend, for a year, for a month, or forever, I'm here. I love you. And just let's not make an issue out of it. We'll try to adhere to the visitation, but if it doesn't work out, which it hasn't been, I'm not going to take issue with it. And I thought that would work. But in hindsight, it was the worst thing I could have done. They were my children. I should have fought her no matter what to the end. And the reason that I did it then is because Oliver was 15, so what were weekends? You know, he'd come to my house. He'd be out all weekend with his friends, you know. And the same really was with Kate. And I thought maybe because of that it would have made it easier. But what it did is it put this this notion that I didn't care about them. And at first it was fine. Oliver stayed with us for a month, and Kate was there all the time. But it started dwindling off. And in about a 4.5-year period after I lost touch with my children. I could count on, both hands the amount of times that I saw them in that period of time. But we reconciled in 1997. Kate was doing a movie in Portland, and we hooked up, and she visited Grandma and her sister Emily, and everything was great. And then she was becoming successful then too, and everything was really working well. And it started falling apart again in about 2005. And I think that the reason that it did is because with Kurt Russell in Goldie's life, and they had a child.
Yeah, they've been together some 28, 30 years now, but they've never married.
Never married, but they've had an open relationship too, and it's worked for them. I mean, it's not for me, but it seems to have worked for them. But Goldie was really trying to create this family, and as soon as she met Kurt, who's a movie star, and they had a child together, that was the family that she believed could make headlines. I'm sure of that, and she did that. And if you go even back before she met Kurt, there's a lot of big stars, big celebrities that go through divorces who don't put their children on the front covers of magazines. Their articles aren't about their children and how she's a single mom struggling with this, with a father that abandoned their children. Also not true. But she actually used the children no differently than she used her relationship with Kurt. And if you look at her publicity throughout the years, she's very, very calculated about her image. And there was, I think it was harmful to my children, and I know it was harmful to my relationship with Goldie, as well as my relationship at one point with my children. So it was an
now Goldie gets some local coverage here because she grew up in the Maryland suburbs of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, we were married in Tacoma Park.
Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were married in her backyard where she grew up.
And have you followed the news enough? I mean, do you keep tabs on her coverage that you saw what the local paper here, it's also a national paper, the Washington Post, said about her in 2005 when she came back to see her old childhood home?
I think, are you alluding to the article where one of her friends said something about her?
This is, she wanted to see her home and nobody was there. So she went in, she broke in basically through a window and started going, she went into the house unauthorized. And then, so the Washington Post talked to the person who lived there, and that person, her name was Donna Wolken, and she said, I'm not ready to call the U.S. Attorney's Office and say this entitled star is breaking into my house, but it would be nice if she called.
Yeah.
Meaning, she would have been happy to show her the house if she would just call first.
Yeah, no, that's very funny, but it's very typical of Goldie. Goldie, there's one rule, and that's Goldie's rule, and it was very difficult to live with because she's very, very into her career and her image, and she thinks that she's above a lot of things. That's a prime example. But when you look at a marriage when there's children involved, and you use those children in the press to further your career, to make the article, maybe more interesting, I think that's really the wrong choice. There's many, many celebrities who have gone through divorce who have never even mentioned.
We're talking with Bill Hudson, the former husband of Goldie Hawn, who's written the book Two Versions, The Other Side of Fame and Family, which is available on Amazon and lots of places, of course. And talking about the there's a quote you have in the book, going to what you were just saying, where I guess one of her favorite lines was, "What Goldie wants, Goldie gets."
Yeah, and it's true.
That's probably true of a lot of Hollywood celebrities. Huh?
Well, it is. They're babied and pampered, and they're worth millions, tens, or if not hundreds of millions of dollars, and they are catered to all the time. So they really do tend to go down that road. I know my daughter Kate has, and it's really a sad thing because, you know, she is such a vivacious and funny and real open, you know, and regular little girl or young woman. But she has a diva thing going on, and it's really interesting. Not only that, but she's sort of followed in her mother's footsteps. She was married to Chris Robinson from the Black Crowes, a musician. She's now married to Matt Bellamy, a musician. And you know, I'm a musician and stuff, and she was around that growing up. She had a similar situation with her first marriage, just that destroyed it, which was she had this affair with Owen Wilson, and it destroyed her marriage. When I was married to Goldie was doing Private Benjamin. She had an affair with this guy named E. Renier, who was an extra on Private Benjamin, which destroyed our marriage. And I can see Kate really following and patterning her mother. Her mannerisms are almost identical. And
well, I'm glad that you mentioned Chris Robinson and Owen Wilson, because there were stories that Chris Robinson had used heroin, and Owen Wilson had gone to rehab for heroin abuse. And what do you think it was that would make Kate? Was that just a coincidence that she ended up with two heroin users?
Well, you know, probably a coincidence. I mean, heroin is a lot of people here are, you know, use it, smoke it, you know,
yeah,
and all that stuff. And I don't know about Owen, but I do know about Chris. But you know, I've only what I've read, but he's obviously been off of it and all that stuff. I think that the lure for Kate with musicians, if I may say so myself, is I think musicians are more interesting than actors. Well, and I'll tell you why.
More iconoclast, contrarian.
Well, I'll tell you what I think it is. I don't think actors, most of them, are artists. I think they're performers. I think they're artistic, but I think that they're performers, and they're basically empty vessels who have this craft and this ability to perform, and there's an art in that. And they're filled with the words from a script or a play, and then they perform that, and they bring their character into it. But when you really think about it, with the exception of a very few people, you know, they're basically bringing a performance version of themselves out. Whereas I believe artists are vessels that are full because they're taking in life around them and are compelled, must express that, and that's writing, and whether it's music or novels or painting. And I think it's a different thing, and I think that the actor is totally self-concerned and has to be narcissistic to a degree because they're their product, their face, their movement, their voice, everything. Whereas a musician can be Joe Cocker, you know, and still make you feel like he's Robert Redford just by the way he sings. You know, I think they're two very different, two very diametrically opposed types. And I think Kate really prefers musicians because, and this is a compliment to her, she's very, very real. I mean, her nature is to be so real and not calculated. And it was the fame that really did that to her. You know,
talking about how celebrities protect their image, and you write in the book about how Goldie started creating, nourishing what she called brand Goldie.
Yeah.
One thing I've always been interested in as a political journalist who's been in D.C. for a couple of decades is we get to ask a lot of tough questions of the politicians. I mean, they hide from us plenty, but we put them in tough spots and ask them lots of tough questions and so on. But celebrity journalism seems to me so completely fake. In that I looked at some interviews of Goldie with Pierce Morgan and some others, and they don't ask any tough questions. And I suppose the deal is you can't get those folks on your shows if you do ask tough questions. And I think that's one reason we just don't get a lot of truth about celebrities.
Right. Well, because they are protecting their image. Unlike, even though politicians attempt to do that, you guys are really good at, getting under their skin. That's your job. But the celebrity press is very different. And if there's a celebrity that's really, really big, like my daughter Kate or Goldie in her heyday, they want to have access to these people. So they basically do, behind the, in the back room trading deals. You can't. It happened on this book with me. There were some, I think it was Access Hollywood, who said, "I love this book. I love Bill Hudson. I'd love to do an interview with him, but I really don't want to upset Kate or Goldie."
I'm not surprised by that at all.
And that happens all the time, where the political journalists, they don't care who they upset. It's their job to upset them and get to something that's real and true. But isn't it interesting, Craig, how the political scene today is almost running parallel with show business?
Yeah, it has become a trend in my business, which I just despise. That politicians are able. Mitt Romney hasn't done a real interview with real journalists for a long time. Doesn't hold press conferences. He only goes on Fox, where Sean Hannity asks him softball questions, and of course doesn't reveal that Mitt Romney's Bain Capital actually is an owner of Sean Hannity's radio show.
Oh, wow.
So in one sense, he actually works for him. But anyhow, but still, it is an ironclad rule. When you do an interview with a politician, you don't make deals up front that, I won't ask about this or ask about that. Now, some journalists know what to avoid to keep in good graces, but nevertheless, it's more explicit in celebrity journalism.
Yeah. Celebrity journalism is really who's ever the hottest really gets the great treatment. Over the years when Goldie was saying things in the press about me that were just absolutely untrue, I had my lawyer send to a lot of these outlets like ABC Television with the Barbara Walters people. She did an interview that was just completely a bunch packed with lies. We sent them the truth. We sent all these magazines the truth, legal documents, letters of correspondence, are refuting what Goldie had said, backed and corroborated by facts, and nobody cared. Nobody printed it. They just didn't care.
I think Dave wants to ask about Cindy Williams.
Yeah, go.
Well, I love the Laverne and Shirley show, so I did watch.
Let's establish you were also married to Cindy Williams. You've had so many lives; it's fascinating.
I was. You know what? It's when I think back on it, it's like, oh my God, But you know what? I've enjoyed every minute of it. It's funny that you mentioned Cindy because she is in New York today. They're being honored by TV Land. She's back there with Penny and Lenny Boogie and everybody. Yeah, it's gonna. And I think I'm not sure of this, but there's going to be a surprise celebrity that's introducing the Laverne and Shirley people, and everybody's thinking there's a buzz that it's Anderson Cooper.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he's a big fan of that show too.
Well, they had a big when they did the True Hollywood Story. What was going on behind the scenes as they were making that show? That was a particularly good episode of the True Hollywood Story because it seemed like it was quite a set on Laverne and Shirley. And there was one thing that they said that I just I wanted to make sure it's true. So there was Cindy Williams, after she started playing Shirley, there was, she expected a certain amount of recognition from the security guard at Paramount where they taped it. And she went up, they said that she drove in one morning and the security guard didn't know who she was. And so she just rammed the gate and drove on through.
I think that's true. She just drove right through, just went through the gate.
I kind of admire that.
Yeah. She's a really good person. She's really a nice person. We were married for 18 years.
Was that long? Oh.
Yeah. We've known each other. We knew each other for 20. and we're still really great friends to this day. And we should have never been married. We both recognize that. We had this really great family. It wasn't a big, our breakup wasn't a big deal. I'm an example of that. When we divorced, we didn't put our kids in the press. Emily and Zachary, none of them, neither one of them. But we should have been brother and sister. We both recognize that. We get along really well. Our family unit worked great when we were married. It works great to this day. We spend holidays together. We had Easter together, Christmas together, all the kids. It's great. So she's a great person.
Yeah, I think this underscores that Goldie Hawn, the separation beyond divorce with Goldie Hawn is something of an aberration in your life, because you also dated Allie McGraw and remained friends with her.
Yeah. Well, Goldie is that. She is an aberration. But I've been friends. I'm friends with everyone. I think what happened with Goldie was, one, I left her, and she did not like that. And for years after we split, which was in 1980, for at least 4 years, she was trying to reconcile, even when I was married to Cindy. But made several attempts. Why don't you come back home? And all this stuff. And I think deep down inside she loved me, and I did her as well. We were like Rome. It was a Romeo and Juliet story. We were just so connected on so many levels. And I think that we had 2 children, and I think that really what she wanted was a long-term relationship, but she wanted it on her terms, and the open marriage stuff just didn't work for me. It just doesn't work. I'm not saying that we're monogamous, because we're not, but when you commit to somebody, you got to try to stay committed. That's the point. Or why bother?
Well, that leads to a clip I want to play from when Goldie was on The View a few months ago, and they asked her about marriage. She always gets asked about why she hasn't married Kurt Russell, and in most of her interviews there's some part of it about that, and she goes into some philosophy here about marriage that sounds like Hollywood babble to me. It doesn't make any sense, but I thought maybe you were uniquely qualified to interpret. Let me play that.
I was married twice. I think that, there's a sense of idealism, really, about wanting to be married and to have a family. But, my feeling is our journey is our journey. And there isn't any way we're going to put a stop, or should we? Because it's all the learning process. How are we going to learn? How are we going to know? I mean, we follow our instincts and our impulses. If they're for the good, which is to create a family, to do something good, more power to you. If it works out, that's awesome. If it doesn't, well, you're part of a very large statistic.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about the YouTube video version of that is the look on Barbara Walters' face and the other co-host is you can tell they don't know what she's talking about.
Yeah. Well, one thing stuck out like a sore thumb is, and it's really just it's just indicative of her self-centeredness that she possesses to a degree that is just unmeasurable, and that she says, and that she is relating marriage or love, let's say, in a marriage, or even children, if you really think about it, to the fact that we're on this journey alone. It's a very self-centered journey for her. There's a lot of people that want to be on this journey with someone that loves them, and someone that likes to be with them, and that creates this family where through thick or through thin, just like in the vows and the commitment. If it was a movie, if we were standing in the fields of Scotland, I vow to you that I will love you forever. I mean, it's a very romantic, but it's a vow. And if you see Goldie puts herself in a position where it's more important for her to be on the journey alone and have less attachments than have a commitment. The other thing with Goldie is that she's very, very conscious about her money, and she got lucky with her first husband, Gus, and with me, because we didn't get a dime. In fact, I paid her $550,000.
Yeah, I think that's important to note. I was surprised to see that. You did not, in divorcing her, you didn't cash out at all.
Nope. In fact, the press, she told the press that I did, but I didn't, and that was it, and Gus didn't cash out either. In fact, he got screwed. They had bought this house together for $150,000. When she met me, she was still married to Gus, and said that she'd give him his half of what they paid for the house. So she gave him $75,000, and about 3 months later, sold the house for $450,000. She's very, very conscious of money and protects that, and I think that has a lot to do with also not wanting to be married.
Well, now, we also want to get into some of your politics, because you had talked about, your relationship with Kate, and the way that some people refer to what happened is parental alienation, where one parent turns the child against the other parent. I know that was a big issue for Alec Baldwin a few years ago. Have you ever worked with Alec Baldwin on the issue?
I have not, but it was a giant issue for him, and it was for me too, because what happens is that you have a situation. Parental alienation can transpire in a marriage when parents are turning, their children or one child against one of the parents, or that parent becomes the one that the kids can run to, and that particular parent is saying, well, don't listen to your mother or don't listen to your father, here's what we'll do. That's a form of it, but the most egregious form of it is when you're actually saying, disparaging things about the other parent. And that happened with me. It's a public record that it happened, not just for my children to see and to feel, but for the world in some cases to get a gander of that. And she painted a picture of me. Now, if she's doing that publicly, you've got to figure that that's going on in the home. I knew it was, because we'd get into these, discussions on the phone, and she would say things that my kids were around, and it was just, I'd say, Goldie, don't say that with the kids. Just keep this between us, or, But it wasn't enough. She wanted it all. She wanted everything. She including the kids, including money, everything. And so she did whatever it took to do that. And what happened was that you can be systematically pushed out of a relationship with your children, no matter how hard you try or how much you're with them. And once she met Kurt, and she started creating this family image that she wanted, so that she could plaster it all over the newspapers, which she did, she started pushing me out even further. She had the kids call Kurt Pa, which is just unconscionable. And there's a guy named Glenn Sachs who actually has had the laws changed for fathers' rights in 38 states. And one of the things that judges are now recommending, and in some cases it's not a law yet in any of these states, is that you don't give a person coming into these children's life, whether it's a boyfriend for the mother or a girlfriend for the father or a second marriage, you call them by their name. You don't call them dad. You don't call them pa. You don't do that, especially if you have a father or a mother, that is hands-on with their children, which I was with Oliver and Kate. So that started happening, which really was confusing, even to Kate. I have this in the book, and one day we had her for the weekend, and Oliver, and we're all hanging around playing by the pool and stuff, and Kate comes up to me and she goes, Dad, and asks me this question. I didn't think anything of it, and a little bit later, she's playing with Emily, and she comes up and she goes, Pa, and she laughed, but very nervously. And I said, what are you calling me Pa for? And Oliver, who was lying on this towel, looks up and goes, Mom's making us call Kurt Pa. and Oliver goes, I don't call him Pa, but Kate's trying to. But it confused Kate. She was calling me Pa, then Dad, and then you just don't do that to a child. And that was Goldie.
How old were they at that time?
Oh, they were young. Kate was like, maybe, let's see, 6, 5.
Wow.
Yeah, you don't do that.
Well, that's the thing I find, relevant about your book to people who are not famous, who go through this experience all over the country. I mean, the people who are in the private life totally and have the same experiences. And we're talking about Bill Hudson's book, two versions, the other side of fame and family. But what I wonder is the effect on kids that this kind of behavior has, and that's what you write about in the book. And I know you probably are not surprised that the book was certainly turned into this tell-all gossipy thing about Hollywood and how awful it is, and you turned on Goldie and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, at the core, I think this book is very relevant to people who experience these kind of things who are not famous.
Well, it's true, and that was the reason that I had to have a reason to write something. And in the early days, when we first split up, I was offered $1 million to write a book. There was nothing to write about. Then, 7 years later, the money kept going down, $750, and finally got down.
It probably correlated to Goldie's career.
Well, it did.
Because he hasn't made a movie for like 10 years, right?
Right. Yeah. No, she hasn't. It did. It was definitely related. That when Kate became famous, they came back again. But I really didn't have anything to say until I recognized something that was really important, and that is that this parental alienation has a great effect on the children. I look at Kate's relationship with her sister Emily and her brother Zachary. Now, those are my children with Cindy Williams, and they were very, very close. They grew up together until they were like all 12, 13, 15, and then there was a break, and then they got back together. They never really missed a beat, with the exception of when I did that ridiculous thing of that open door policy and said my kids could come and see me when they wanted to. But what happens is that if you really look at what's happening with Kate, she's alienating her children, and Oliver is too, from their aunts and uncles, their grandfather, their blood, period. And it's passed on. And I recognize that. And I recognize that I was the perpetrator as well of alienation when I said to my children, you can be with me anytime you want, whether it's a day or a week or a month or a year. That's the wrong thing to say. I actually exacerbated and furthered that alienation by doing that. Parents have to stay involved with seeing their children, period, because if you do that, your children will do the same, especially when they meet an unfortunate situation like Kate did, and being divorced and everything. And she's going through it with Chris Robinson now. She's in England a lot of the time with Matt Bellamy, who lives there, in New York. And Chris, who used to see Ryder all the time, doesn't see him as often. There's all kinds of things going on. And I also might add, unlike Goldie, you haven't heard much from Chris Robinson about the divorce or anything. You haven't heard anything. That's because he can't talk about it. I'm sure he has a lot to say. I mean, and I would never, pierce that veil for him. But, Kate was very shrewd in protecting her image with that whole thing. And the process of it all is also was a product of being alienated from her father, and is doing the same with not just her son and his father, but also with Ryder and Emily and Zachary and all the extended family. They've got a great grandmother they don't know.
Yeah, and I believe so strongly in grandparents' rights, and that is, sad when the grandparents can't see their grandkids. So I actually took the step. Somebody sent me a petition to ask Kate to let you see your grandchildren, and I signed it. I don't know if it's delivered yet, but there is one out there.
Oh wow! Yeah, it's a very sad thing, because the truth of the matter is that I have over the years reached out big time, calling, sending letters, and there's a lot of work to be done if I can even put it back on track. But the truth of the matter is that what happens when I die? I know we always say that, but when you really play that scene out, so I die, hopefully in a long time, but you drop dead, and now there's a funeral, and now there's these children. What do? Do they come to the funeral? Do they call their brothers and sisters? What happened to Dad? Oh my God, or do they not? What happens there? What happens, God forbid, if something happened to Oliver and Kate or their children? There are issues that exist that should really go far beyond, holding on to resentment and all this negativity that has transpired. I'm not saying that it could ever be what it could have been, but I'm saying that I believe that it can be healed, but it takes all parties to just basically sit down and recognize that we're all bound by blood, that there's something about blood that can create extreme emotions of love and hate, and I think that there's a lot of love there too. It's just been swept under the carpet.
Bill, we're up at the end of the hour, and I just can't thank you enough for getting on and talking to us. This is only our fourth week of our little blog radio project.
No, I enjoyed it. Great. And, fantastic.
And we got our celebrity guru Dave B here, who is I say he's smarter than Perez Hilton and better looking.
I'm probably not as mean, I hope.
Yeah, definitely. I hope you're better looking than him too. He's another one.
We're going to go out with one of the Hudson Brothers songs I love, the Rendezvous. You mentioned it earlier about how that came about when you wrote that.
Yeah, we wrote it with Bruce Johnson from the Beach Boys. It was great. We were in this restaurant, this famous Hollywood restaurant called Shay J's in Santa Monica, and there was this back room. It's this real funky place, sawdust on the floor. And, of course, we had too much to, drink, and we had a guitar in the car. I got the guitar and wrote the song, and the rest was history.
All right, and here it is. Thanks so much, Bill.
Thanks
talking to you.
Take care.
Why don't you take me on
You're listening to Trail Mix Radio from CraigCrawford.com.